Good morning. My name is Eleanor Roosevelt, and this is the story of my life. I was born in New York City on October the 11th, 1884. The first few years of my life were dedicated to the usual child activities and, of course, schooling. In 1901, my uncle, Teddy Roosevelt, assumed the presidency after President McKinley was assassinated after his second inauguration. In 1903, I enrolled in the Junior League of New York, where I taught calisthenics and dancing to immigrants. I joined the Consumers League the same year and investigated the working conditions in garment districts. Later, in 1903, I became engaged to my fifth cousin, Franklin Roosevelt. We would get married on March 17, 1905. In 1912, I attended my first Democratic Party convention. From this point on, I started becoming more interested in my husband's political career, along with raising our children. In 1919, I volunteered at the St. Elizabeth Hospital to visit World War I veterans. I also volunteered at the International Congress of Working Women in Washington. The following year, I traveled with Franklin on his campaign trail as he was trying to become vice president. This is the same year I would become good friends with Lois Howe and join the League of Women Voters. The following year it was hard on me as my dear husband became paralyzed with polio. I wouldn't let this keep him or me from helping people. In 1922 I became a member of the Women's Trade Union League and joined the Women's Division of the Democratic State Committee. In 1925 my husband built me the Val-Kill estate in Hyde Park, New York. Shortly after I would found the Val-Kill Furniture Factory. 1 year later, my friends and I purchased the Todd Hunter School, where I eventually taught history and government. In 1928, the Democratic National Committee appointed me to the Director of Bureau of Women's Activities. During the same year, my husband was elected to the Governor of New York. In 1932, our family received yet another great honor as my husband was elected to the President of the United States. On March 6, 1933, I would become the first wife of the President to hold an all-female press conference. In 1934, I formed the National Youth Administration and coordinated meetings between my husband and NAACP leader, Walter White, to discuss anti-lynching legislation. A few years later, during a conference on human welfare being held in Birmingham, Alabama, I broke barriers by sitting between both white and blacks during the conference. In 1935, I coordinated a meeting with FDR, James Fairley, head of Democratic National Committee, and Molly Dewson, head of the Women's Division of DNC, to discuss the role of women in political elections. This is the same year I would begin publishing my column, My Day. The following year, I was elected to be the head of United Nations Human Rights Commission and began to draft the Declaration of Human Rights, which was later passed in December of 1948. As the years grew on, I grew to support the presidency of John F. Kennedy, who later reappointed me to United Nations and appointed me as chair of the President's Commission on the Status of Women. A year after this, I grew very ill and died November 7, 1962.